Hi, I'm Cynthia Schiller. Please like and subscribe. So this is in response to a viewer comment. It says, so are you saying that a person with NPD has weak gray and white matter? And how can they turn somebody who has a healthy amount of gray and white matter into a narcissistic person? So there's a difference between narcissistic and NPD. NPD has 5 out of 9 traits. We all have narcissistic traits, but as we go through our abuse, it changes our brain. So I have some brain scans that I can show you. But what exactly is gray matter? Gray matter in the central nervous system allows a person to regulate their movements, memories, emotions. And that's a big thing with, as we go through our abuse, it starts to affect our emotions. Our narcissists went through the brain damage early on in their life. So sometimes it's hard to understand, like, how can a healthy person change? But there is brain damage that occurs, just like our healthy soldiers that go off to war. They have some traumatic event. All of a sudden, it changes their brain. It changes their brain. They have post-traumatic stress disorder. Stress affects our brain. So our brain is neuroplastic, where it can change, adapt. Parts of our brain can rejuvenate, or it can kind of learn to adapt, such as a person who goes blind, their sense of hearing increases. So our brain can adapt in ways like that too. But the CPTSD that we went through causes us to react certain ways. There's that reactive abuse that we do. We're acting out of character. We don't know our reality because of the abuse that we went through. So all this stress that we go through causes that Stockholm syndrome. The intermittent reinforcement leads to us loving our abuser, and we don't feel safe. The only safety we feel is trying to work to get back to where we were. It gets us honed in on the wrong thing, our abuser. So the brain has to communicate. And when we go through these abusive tactics, it changes how our neurotransmitters and neurons interact. So the brain of the narcissist, there's lost connections, and it does keep them in a childlike state as far as emotions. Some have some empathy, others have almost none. And it varies, but their tactics are very childlike, and they're very confusing because we see an adult person, and they also gave us this facade. So it becomes toxic. If you know somebody's an asshole, if they're out front with it, you know to avoid them. If you know that they're hostile, you know to avoid them. But our narcissist doesn't let us know what to do. So we're in this heightened state of fight, flight, or fawn. And the adrenaline rushes that we get during that stage, the craving for the dopamine, the oxytocin, all these things that are going on in our brain cause brain damage. So I'll get into my slides in just a second, but our gray matter is about 25% of our total weight of our brain, but it only uses 5% of our blood flow that goes through it. Some injury to the brain can be due to lacks of oxygen, but there's all different kinds of brain damage. It can be closed head injuries, open head injuries. Open head injuries are actually kind of better because when it's a closed head injury, all the brain pressure from the swelling starts damaging. But gray matter is also where there's a lot of cells that come together and they form the parts of the brain, such as the cortex or the hippocampus. So some of these neurons, such as excitatory neurons, they make contacts. It's early morning, contacts with other neurons or cell bodies within that gray matter. And they use this contact to make other cells as a way of communicating with other neurons across a network. But when there's that brain damage, we're going to react in a different state. It's like the narcissist gets us into an infantile or childlike state. So we're reacting in survival mode. And that's what our narcissist does. So it's changing our brain. It is changing our brain. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you so you can see that sorry, there's lots of things I gotta click on. But this is important to know. And this is why I really appreciate everybody who questions me. I love clarifying things, but I have a couple things I want to show you. Here is a depressed brain, and this is a normal brain where they're not depressed. So even just in this screen, you can see that it is a kind of brain damage. So we're going through our depression, we're going through loss of reality, that Stockholm syndrome, confusion, depression, all kinds of things that we're going through when we have CPTSD, just like our soldiers who have PTSD, it changes them. And if you want to think about how, let's say your child's missing and you're in this heightened state of panic and depression and being scared, it's going to start to affect your brain. So your child's returned after a year and a half, you finally have your child back. That brain damage is still there. So it's not like, oh, life is good. You're still going to be hypervigilant. You're still going to be paranoid that something like that might happen again. And we're reacting to the stressors or the abuse that we went through. It changes our brain. So how does a narcissist change our brain? Through the abuse. And let's see what I got. So here's all the different mental illnesses. Bipolar, PTSD, CPTSD is very similar to PTSD. PTSD is a one-time event. CPTSD is over time, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. But we're also going through depression, anxiety. It is changing our brain. And, you know, there should be a lot of activity going on. But here you see the normal brain versus the PTS brain. Mental illness affects the communication. And when you are healing or going through the breakup, the withdrawal that we get because of the intermittent reinforcement and the Stockholm syndrome, it causes they've had studies where the withdrawal is similar to a cocaine withdrawal because of the balance of our brain. We were in a heightened state, which we're only supposed to be in that heightened state to make good decisions in an emergency situation. But once you're in that heightened state, it starts to cause damage. And sometimes that's hard to understand. Like, how does that change things? It's just like if I was to touch, don't do this, but if I was to touch an electrical outlet and got zapped, I'd be okay most of the time. But if I just kept my finger there, it's going to start causing damage, whether it's a burn, whether it goes through my body. Also, the amount of exposure dictates how much damage was done. So some of us have been in these decades-long relationships. So if you meet somebody who is NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and they call you fat, whatever, they called you fat, but if it's over and over and over again to where it's up and down, you're too skinny, you're too fat, you look great, you look like shit, where you're trying to please this person, and the more exposure and the more types of damage. So now they're not coming home because they think you're too fat or too skinny, or now they're not doing this, or they're raging at you, or whatever the situation is, it starts to affect your brain. This is, I did an orphan right here. You see the damage. So this is due to neglect right here. And there's missing areas of the amygdala. The amygdala is responsible for our emotions. So depending on how much damage, how severe the damage was, it's gone. That area is gone. It's not working. And this is the healthy brain. But as we start to get into our brain fog, we're starting to get more stressed. We're like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to make decisions. Or now that we're single, we're like, how am I going to pay the bills, or who's going to watch the kids? We're causing more stress, and stress causes brain damage, just like it causes diabetes, heart disease, all different kinds of things. The reactions that we have in our relationships with anybody, with our kids. Now we're snapping at them. We're short with them, with our temper. We're trying to get back on track, but stress causes our reaction. Then we might feel bad, and so we start to feel depressed that we yelled at our kids, and that's stress. And it's just unhealthy. So this is your normal brain. You got your cluster B here. There's a lot less activity, And it's odd how when they're bored, they got to fill this up. This is missing the healthy brain activity. So to fill this area up, they act out. And it can be very destructive in relationships. But the narcissist messes with our brain. And the longer the exposure, it does change us, because the narcissist focuses on themselves. So now that we're traumatized, we're trying to get healthy again. Our body is responding to that, wanting to get healthy again. So during that time, we are focused more on ourselves, and we're starting to act kind of narcissistic. We're not understanding, like our kids crying. We're like, just shut the fuck up. I'm over it. And that's not normally how we would be. Normally we'd be like, sweetie, what's wrong? But we start to focus on ourselves, and that's narcissistic, because we are healing instead of empathizing. But the narcissist, the damage is done. And they don't care to retrain their brain. Just like you see different people who are, we'll go with blind or Helen Keller. There's people who overcome and people who succumb. So just like a blind person with that Braille, I can do sign language. I cannot read Braille. That's amazing. I know how to see it with my eyes, how to read the letters, but you have to train yourself to adapt. So I probably could painstakingly try to change my fingers and my brain to kind of understand it. Same with languages. I'm pretty good at languages, but you have to train your brain to pick up on things. And it's easier as a child to do that. As you're an adult, it's so much harder to learn a new language, new skills sometimes. It's easier for a kid to learn gymnastics than it is for me to learn gymnastics right now. So the narcissist lost out on that growth time. And I'm a teacher. The more I see kids, the way they act, the way things just pass out of their brain, you tell them things over and over and over again. The narcissist truly is in that narcissistic childlike state. And we become that way because we become dependent, like the Stockholm syndrome. And you look at these like Samantha Smart or other children that were kidnapped. Why did they love that person? They became dependent on them. And you're like, how is that healthy? This person took you away from your family. They locked you up, made you do sexual things. They made you do this, that. They didn't feed you right. They didn't do medical care. They made you lie. You felt scared for your life. They threatened to kill your family if you ever said anything. And you love them. You love them. Can't wait to see them again. It's mind-boggling, but it's the truth. That's what happens. It's the brain trying to survive, have our bodies survive. So it changes what state of mind we're in. And I hope that answers it, because it kills your brain, just like drugs. They damage the communication. So it's either damaged or destroyed. Damaged or destroyed depends on how bad it gets. Some people have predisposure to mental illness. Some of it can be genetic, and there's triggers. And if that brings you into state of stress, even with your predisposures, it's going to mess with your brain, just like schizophrenia. You have a threshold of what you can take. Then once you cross over, you can't cross back. You are schizophrenic for life. And the narcissist, maybe their threshold was that they can't come back. So there are some self-aware narcissists that struggle. There is some remission, but the success rate, unless they continue to go to therapy or to really work on themselves, just like me with Braille or the languages that I learned, it's out of my mind now. I'm not very good at Spanish or French or Japanese or sign language anymore. You revert back. I revert back to English. So the narcissist is going to revert back to their tactics. And even when I'm teaching, I'm not perfect. You tell the kids to sit down and you do all the tactics that teachers are taught. And eventually you get frustrated and you lose your cool and you're like, sit down. We shouldn't do that, but we get annoyed too. And the narcissist gets into that too. But they're quicker, just like kids are quicker to lose their cool. Kids will lose their cool the drop of a hat. And that's what the narcissists are going to do. They don't have that coping system. When I lose my cool, I mean, I'll be honest, there's times it's overwhelming. You kind of go back to what works. It's not necessarily what's healthy. So I'm not perfect, but you try your best. But the narcissists, they're like children. Children can try their best for so long. And I'm starting to see the attention span, the anger, the triggers, and it matches up with a narcissist. And we lose our cool quicker when we've been abused. I'm still healing. And, you know, there's times you're like, I got to relate to the kids. And you're like, oh, I need somebody to relate to me because I can't take it anymore. But so the narcissist is all about them. So they don't even take that time really. So we all lose our cool. But the narcissist manipulates too. And sometimes, as we go through that abuse, now we're lying to our family, like, oh, they're working, they'd love to be here today. They're not working, they don't want to go with you. So now we're lying. And all the different things that we do after we go through that abuse. We're not liars, but now we are. We're not this, but now we are. We're not short-tempered, but now we are. And that's why we have to break the cycle and start to heal. And are we going to be the same? We're not going to be the same. But it's up to us to make ourselves better. Because we only use like 10% of our brain. So some brain matter can rejuvenate, some can't. But there's things that we can do to make ourselves better. Just like I forgot French and Spanish, I could study it again. I could learn it. And it would be easier because I've already been exposed to it. And we've been exposed to what we feel is love. We've been exposed to what red flags are. So next time it should be easier. We just have to be aware, not to bring the baggage into our new relationship, to watch out for red flags, to be cautious of being overly vigilant, because we're going to be hyper vigilant. And we don't want to do that to somebody else. We want to be healthy. That's why don't be like a narcissist and just jump into a new relationship. Take the time to heal and love yourself first. So comment below, did you guys make your bed today? I'll tell you what, our home space is a reflection of our energy. So make your bed, take your shower, eat healthy, and give yourself peace in your sanctuary. as we're working on our inner energy, work on the outer energy too. And it works. It lifts you up. And if you neglect the things, it brings you down. So even just making your bed, it'll make a difference. And then you get to go to bed, get a good night's sleep, all snuggled up. Have a great day. And I hope that answered your question. Guys, if you ever disagree with me, that's fine. I'll either clarify what I'm trying to say or do a little more research and give you props. But I am certified to teach psychology, a lot of study, but yeah, it's ever evolving. And there's so many different scientists, therapists, psychologists that have varying opinions. So let's break the code, figure this out together. I'll see you in the next video. One-on-ones are available. Please share it if you know somebody this might help. I'll see you soon.